It was my birthday. I was sitting in the living room just watching TV like I always do. I didn't expect anyone, and then Rachel walked in without knocking. She was already filming with her phone, holding it up in front of her face and talking loud. She laughed as she came in and said, "All right, guys, I'm at my grandpa's house, the dinosaur himself." I looked at her, confused, but I didn't say anything. She didn't even say happy birthday. She walked straight into the living room like it was a joke. She pointed the phone at my old chair and said, "Look at this stuff. Vintage or just ancient?" She walked around slowly, filming my bookshelf, my slippers by the couch, the coat I left on the back of the door. "He lives like it's still 1950, she said to the phone, laughing again. I didn't move. I just sat there. She was putting on a show for people who weren't even in the room. She turned the camera toward me and said, "Guys, look, he literally smells like mothballs." I didn't respond. She zoomed the camera in on my face and said, "Say hi to TikTok, Grandpa." I waved a little, but she laughed like I'd done something funny. "See?" she said, turning back to the phone. "Total boomer behavior." I heard the dinging sound as the comments started showing up on her screen. She turned the volume up so I could hear what people were saying. I didn't want to, but it was loud. Someone said, "Send him to a nursing home." She read out loud, then laughed so hard she bent over. I sat there in silence. I didn't even look at her. She walked over to me and put her hand on my shoulder for a second, like she was being sweet, but I knew she was just doing it for the camera. "Maybe he doesn't even understand what's going on," she added. She walked toward the hallway and opened the door to my bedroom without asking. "Let's see what this man wears," she said, still holding the phone up. She opened my closet and started flipping through the shirts I had hung there. "Oh my God," she said. "This one still has shoulder pads. Who even wears this stuff?" She pulled out one of my old plaid shirts and showed it to the camera. "Smells like it's been locked in here since the war." I stood up and started to say something, but she cut me off, laughing. "Relax, Grandpa. It's just content." She kept filming like it was no big deal. I walked back into the living room and sat down again. I heard her reading more comments from her phone. "Your grandpa's house is creepy," someone wrote. "Does he even know how to use a microwave?" another one said. She laughed again and said, "He probably still uses a flip phone." Rachel came back to the living room and sat on the arm of my chair. "Smile," she said, pointing the phone at both of us. I didn't smile. She took the photo anyway. "Wow, such a mood," she said, showing the camera our selfie. She added a filter and laughed. "Let me show them the kitchen," she said, getting up. I didn't say anything. She walked into the kitchen and opened the fridge. "There's nothing in here but eggs and expired ketchup," she said. "Guys, he needs a grocery list from 1999. She laughed again. She opened the freezer, looked at the frozen meals and said, "TV dinners, classic." I stayed in my chair. I wasn't going to follow her around my own house. I could still hear her voice from the kitchen, talking to her audience like they were her friends. She opened the cabinets and read the labels out loud. "Canned peas, Grandpa, what is this?" I didn't answer. I just stared at the wall. She came back with a slice of the cake I bought for myself the day before. I had written "Happy Birthday" on it with one of those little icing tubes. She didn't even ask. She just took a knife, cut a piece, and started eating it with a fork she pulled from the drawer. "This cake's not bad," she said. I stayed quiet. She sat on the couch and put her feet up like it was her house. She looked at her phone again and said, "The comments are still coming in. This is gonna blow up." She scrolled, laughed again, and kept talking to the phone. "You guys are loving this," she said. "I swear, it's like stepping into a time machine." She picked up the rest of her cake and stood up. "Let me just grab a quick shot of the outside for the thumbnail," she said. She walked to the front door with her phone already recording again, getting one last clip. She opened the door and stood in the frame, filming the outside of my house. "Okay guys, last part," she said into the phone. "This is where Grandpa lives. Real horror movie vibes, right?" She flipped the camera back to her face and smiled. "All right, say bye, Grandpa." I looked at her but didn't say anything. "He's kinda shy," she added, laughing. She blew a kiss toward the phone and ended the live stream. I thought she might say something to me finally. Maybe goodbye. Maybe thank you. But she didn't. She looked down at her phone again, started typing something, then grabbed her bag off the chair. "Okay, I gotta go," she said. "I need to post this before midnight." She didn't look back. She didn't close the door behind her. I heard her car start outside while I sat there, still in the same chair, the rest of the cake untouched on the counter. She said she needed to post it before midnight. 2 days later, she came back. I was in the kitchen making coffee when I heard the front door open. Rachel walked in holding a small bouquet of flowers and a plastic box of store-bought sweets. "Hey, Grandpa," she said like nothing had happened. "I wanted to make it up to you." I didn't say much. She handed me the flowers, took out her phone, and snapped a few photos of us standing together. I didn't smile. She opened the box of sweets and placed it on the table like it was a peace offering. Then she sat down across from me and asked, "How much do you pay in property taxes?" I looked at her. She smiled like it was a normal question. "I'm just curious," she said. "This house is pretty big." She took out her phone again, opened a calculator app, and started typing numbers. "You know, I could help you sell this place. There are apps now that make it super easy." She stood up and started walking from room to room again, this time slower. She had a notepad in her hand and a tape measure. I stayed in the kitchen. I could hear her talking to herself while she measured the walls. 12 feet here, maybe 15 there, she said. She walked into the hallway and into the guest room. "So many windows," she said. "That's good." I didn't ask what she was doing. She walked back toward the kitchen and looked at me. "Grandpa, this house has huge potential, like real value." I didn't answer. She walked into the living room again, wrote something down, and then took a few more photos. "People love older homes like this," she said. "With some light remodeling, this place could be worth a lot." She wasn't talking to me anymore. It felt like she was thinking out loud or pitching to someone who wasn't in the room. I stayed silent and kept looking out the window. In the afternoon, I was in the backyard when I heard her voice again. She wasn't alone. "Grandpa," she yelled. "I brought Josh." A man walked in behind her, tall, with sunglasses and a big smile. "Hey, sir," he said. "Nice to finally meet you." I nodded. Rachel pointed at the garden and said, "We were just talking about this space. It's got real charm." Josh looked around and said, "Yeah, with some gravel and maybe a deck, this could add a lot of value." They walked along the edge of the yard, pointing at the bushes, the fence, even the old shed. Rachel filmed everything with her phone. Josh asked, "Do you still have the original deed to the house?" I didn't answer. Rachel turned the camera off and said, "Just asking in case you ever want help with paperwork." I walked back inside without saying anything. They stayed out there, walking and talking like they owned the place already. Back inside, I went to my bedroom and closed the door. I could still hear them outside through the open windows. Their voices were quieter now, like they didn't want me to hear what they were saying. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the floor. I didn't want to know what plans they were making. I didn't ask for their help. I didn't ask them to come. I stayed in that room for a while. I heard the front door open again, then footsteps moving through the hallway, then silence. I didn't go check. I waited. Maybe they had left. Maybe they were still outside. I didn't want to find out. I just stayed there listening to the sound of the wind hitting the old screen in the window. I felt tired but couldn't rest. My head felt heavy. I stayed sitting on the bed, shoes still on, door shut, waiting until the noise finally stopped. When I finally came out, the house was quiet. No voices, no doors opening, no phones recording. I walked to the front window and looked outside. They were gone. I stepped onto the porch and saw that the front gate was wide open. I walked down the steps and over to it. The lock was still hanging there, unused. I closed the gate and pushed the bolt through. Then I went back inside and headed straight for the hallway closet. I pulled down the old metal box I kept on the top shelf. Inside were my documents, birth certificate, house deed, insurance papers. I looked through them one by one, then locked the box and carried it to my bedroom. I placed it in the back of my closet under a pile of jackets and a folded blanket. I made sure it wasn't visible. Then I shut the closet door. I walked back to the gate one last time to check the lock. They had left it open. Rachel invited me to dinner at this new place near downtown. She texted me in the morning and said she had something important to discuss. Her words were family business. I didn't ask questions. I just replied, "Okay," and said I'd be there. The restaurant was one of those modern spots with fake plants on the walls and music too loud to talk over. When I walked in, she and Josh were already sitting at a table near the window. They weren't looking at menus. They had a laptop open between them. Rachel waved me over like we were old friends meeting for lunch. I sat down. There wasn't even a "how are you" or "how was your day?" She just smiled and said, "Glad you made it, Grandpa. We've been working on something we're excited to show you." Josh nodded and turned the laptop toward me. "We mocked up some ideas for the house," he said, like it was totally normal. The screen showed a slideshow. The first picture was a 3D model of my house, except it didn't really look like my house anymore. The walls were painted white, all the wood siding gone. The porch was replaced by glass panels. "This would be the new front," Josh said. Rachel added, "Minimalist, clean, very marketable." They clicked to the next slide, which showed the backyard turned into some kind of lounge with fake grass, a hot tub, and string lights. Josh said, "We could fit 6 guest suites on the property if we use modular construction." I didn't say anything. Rachel said, "You'd still live there, obviously, that's important." She smiled. "But the day-to-day stuff? We'd handle that. Bookings, maintenance, management, all of it." I looked at her. She kept smiling, but her voice got faster. "We've thought of everything, Grandpa. Seriously? We even spoke to someone about zoning. It's totally doable." She tapped the laptop like she was proud of herself. Then she pulled a folder out of her bag and placed it on the table like it was dessert. "We brought a draft," she said. Inside was a printed contract, maybe 5 or 6 pages thick, clipped together at the top. She flipped straight to the second page and pointed at a line near the bottom. "This is where you'd sign. It's just a preliminary thing, nothing final yet." Josh slid a pen across the table. I picked up the papers and started reading. I didn't rush. The first paragraph had words like temporary stewardship, property management, and licensing of residents. The second one mentioned revenue distribution, and something about maintenance deductions. I folded the whole stack slowly and slid it into my jacket pocket. Rachel's smile tightened. She looked at Josh, then back at me. "We know you'll sign, Grandpa. We trust you." Her voice was soft but firm. Didn't say anything. I just sat there holding the pen, not using it. She tried to make small talk after that. Asked me if I'd seen the new movie with that actor I didn't know. I said no. Josh talked about how short-term rentals were booming. "Passive income is king right now," he said, cutting into a steak he barely touched. Rachel picked at a salad and scrolled on her phone while talking. I didn't order food, just asked for a coffee. I wasn't hungry. I stared at the table most of the time. They kept going, talking about websites, promotion strategies, using influencers to get bookings. "You'd be the face of the brand," Rachel said like that was a bonus. "Everyone loves old people doing modern stuff." Josh laughed and said, "It's charming." I nodded slowly but didn't respond. I could tell they were already acting like it was theirs. Like my house was a product and I was just a character they needed for marketing. I checked the time. I was ready to leave. When the waiter came over, I asked for the check. Rachel looked surprised. "Already," she said. I didn't answer. I pulled some cash from my wallet and placed it on the table. It was more than enough. I didn't want change. Josh reached for the contract again, but I shook my head. "I'll read it later," I said. Rachel didn't argue. She just smiled that tight smile again. "We're really excited about this, Grandpa," she said. I stood up and pushed the chair back in slowly. Josh said, "Let us know if you have any questions." I didn't reply. I walked past the other tables, out the door, and didn't look back. The night air felt heavy, but I kept walking. I didn't bring a car. I walked 2 blocks down until I found the bus stop bench. I sat there in silence, holding the folder in my coat pocket, waiting for the bus to show up. I left without saying goodbye. The next morning I got up early and took the folded contract from my coat pocket. I placed it inside a brown envelope and caught the bus to my lawyer's office downtown. I didn't call ahead. When I got there, the receptionist asked if I had an appointment. I said no, but she let me wait. After about 20 minutes, Mr. Wilkins came out and waved me in. I handed him the contract and sat across from his desk while he read it. He didn't say much at first. Then he flipped back to the second page and pointed at a sentence I hadn't noticed. It was written in smaller font. It said that once signed, the property rights would be transferred into Rachel's name for the purpose of streamlining development. I asked him to print 2 certified copies of the full document. He stamped both, signed them, and handed them back to me. I left them in my bag and went straight home. 3 days later, I got a letter in the mail. It was from a real estate company I'd never heard of. The envelope was glossy and had their logo printed on it. Inside was a formal letter thanking me for authorizing the listing of my home. It said they looked forward to helping me maximize the potential of the property. I didn't waste time. I called the number printed at the top. A young man answered, introduced himself as Kevin, and asked how he could help. I told him I never authorized anything. He paused and said, "We received your approval through our online portal." I asked who submitted it. He said, "Rachel Porter." I asked to see the full documentation. He told me to come to their office, so I took the next bus downtown again. When I arrived, they handed me a folder with scanned forms. On the last page, I saw my signature, except I never signed it. I took the whole folder and walked straight to the nearest copy shop. I made 3 full-color copies of everything, front and back. Then I placed the original and the copies in a red folder I bought at the shop. I carried that folder under my arm all the way to the notary's office. I asked the clerk to verify the documents, and she confirmed that the signature on the real estate forms had been uploaded digitally. It wasn't original. I told her I wanted to block my property from any pending or future transactions. She handed me another form. I filled it out at the counter, showed my ID, and signed right there in front of her. She added a stamp, logged it into the system, and said it was done. Now no transfer, sale, or mortgage could move forward without my physical presence and ID. I thanked her, zipped up the red folder, and walked back out without speaking to anyone. I didn't go straight home. I got off the bus 3 stops earlier and went to the Veterans Foundation office. I asked to speak to someone about making a donation or setting up a property transfer. They gave me a clipboard with a form and a brochure. I sat on one of their waiting room chairs and filled out everything. I listed the house, the lot number, and confirmed that the transfer would only take place after my passing. I asked for a clause that prohibited resale for at least 10 years. They agreed. I signed, and they signed. Then they gave me a notarized copy. I asked for one more favor. I wanted this included in my will. They gave me the name of an estate lawyer nearby. I went to his office the same day. We updated the will, attached the documents, and signed again. Everything was stamped, verified, and sealed. I placed the new will in a sealed envelope. The bank was only a 10-minute walk from there, so I kept going. I asked to speak with a manager about accessing my deposit box. I had to show my ID and signature twice. When they opened the vault, I placed the sealed envelope in the red folder inside the metal box. Then I closed it, spun the lock, and asked them to update the entry in the system to mark a change in contents. They did. I signed the logbook and stepped out. I didn't take any detours on the way back. I didn't stop for lunch or coffee. I didn't text Rachel. I didn't call anyone. I got on the bus, sat by the window, and watched as the city passed by without looking too closely. When I got off at my stop, it was already getting dark. I walked up the driveway, unlocked the door, and went straight to the router. I unplugged the Wi-Fi and left it like that. The house felt different without the background noise from the internet. No notifications, no buzzing phone, no updates. I sat in the living room without turning on the TV. I didn't open the blinds. I didn't heat anything up for dinner. I just sat in my chair and stared at the far wall. Every sound in the house felt louder. The ticking of the clock, the creak in the hallway floorboards. I stayed still. My phone lit up twice. Messages, probably. But I didn't check. I left it face down on the kitchen table. No one knocked. No one called the landline. I sat there until it got late, then finally stood up and turned off the living room light. I walked down the hall, past the door where my wife used to sew, past the room Rachel used to sleep in as a kid. I lay down fully dressed and closed my eyes. I spent the rest of the night in silence. It was Friday morning when they showed up. Rachel knocked once and then opened the front door before I could even answer. She was holding 2 suitcases and said, "Hey, Grandpa, surprise." Josh was right behind her, dragging in a big duffel bag and a box. I asked what was going on, and she said their apartment was getting some repairs done, plumbing or something, and they just needed a few days to stay over. I didn't say yes, but they were already walking down the hall like it was settled. Rachel dropped her bags in the guest room and opened the window wide. Josh started pushing the dresser across the wall. I watched them move around like they lived there. She asked if I had extra towels. I pointed to the closet without speaking. Josh pulled out a charger from his bag and plugged in his phone near the couch. I sat down at the table and just watched. No one asked. Later that night, I was heading to the kitchen when I saw Josh in the living room with a tape measure. He was holding one end against the wall and pulling it across the floor. I asked what he was doing. He looked up and said, "Just checking some things." A minute later, Rachel walked in holding a notepad. I asked again, more firmly this time. She smiled and said, "Don't worry, Grandpa. It's just for proportion." I stood there staring while she wrote something down. I walked past them and made a sandwich in the kitchen. They stayed up late, talking in low voices in the guest room. I could hear drawers opening and closing. Around midnight, Josh came out to get water from the fridge like nothing was weird. I didn't say anything. He didn't either. I went to bed, locked my door, and kept the light on for a while. It didn't feel like my house anymore that night. The next morning, I went to the kitchen and found a stack of paint cans by the fridge. There were also 2 paint rollers still in plastic and a folded drop cloth leaning against the counter. I stood there for a minute, staring. Rachel came in with a cup of coffee in her hand like she didn't notice anything strange. "We figured we could help freshen up the place a bit," she said. "No big deal." I told her they had until the end of the afternoon to pack up and leave. She looked at me like I was being unreasonable. "Grandpa, you're overreacting," she said. "We're just trying to help." I didn't answer. I just turned around and went back to my room. I sat there for a few minutes thinking about what to do. Then I got up, grabbed their suitcases from the guest room one by one, and carried them to the front porch without saying a word. Josh saw me through the window and came outside. "Hey, what are you doing?" he asked. I didn't respond. I opened the front gate and left it wide open. Rachel followed him out a few seconds later. She stood on the porch looking at the bags. "You don't need to be like this," she said. I didn't look at her, I just said, "Out." Josh picked up one of the bags and muttered something under his breath. Rachel didn't say anything else. They both walked out, dragging their things behind them. I stayed by the gate, holding it open. Once they stepped outside, I closed it slowly and locked it. I didn't wave, I didn't speak. They didn't look back. After they left, I went inside, took my toolbox out of the closet, and changed the locks on both front and back doors. I tested them twice to make sure. Then I walked around the house and shut every window tight. Once all the doors and windows were locked, I made a pot of coffee and poured myself a cup. I walked out to the front porch with the mug in my hand. I sat down in the chair by the railing, the one I used to sit in during the summer when Rachel was a kid. The air felt dry. I looked down at the porch boards. A few were chipped. A dried leaf rolled across the step. I didn't move much. I just sat there, sipping coffee slowly. I could still see some faint marks where Josh had dragged one of the suitcases across the wood. I thought about painting over it later. For now, I didn't want to do anything. I leaned back and stared at the empty walkway outside the gate. No cars, no people, no more voices in the hallway. I stayed there until it got dark, just watching, not really thinking. I didn't turn the porch light on. By the time the sun had fully set, the air had cooled off. I stayed outside. I didn't go back in right away. The house felt better with them gone, quieter. I could finally hear myself think again. The coffee in my cup had gone cold, but I kept holding it. A neighbor walked by across the street, gave a short wave. I nodded back. No small talk. I stood up for a second, stretched my legs, then sat back down. I thought about locking the gate with a chain, maybe even putting a second lock on the back door. But I didn't want to move yet. I just sat still. I could hear a few dogs barking in the distance. Someone revved a car a few blocks away. I looked at the stars. Nothing deep, nothing dramatic. I was just tired. When it was too dark to see much, I finally stood up, walked inside, and shut the door behind me. A reporter called me around 10 in the morning. I was finishing my coffee when the phone rang. She introduced herself and said she was working on a local segment about former firefighters from the city. She asked if I was the man who helped pull children out of a house fire back in 1987. I said yes. She asked a few more questions, then asked if they could come by and do a short video interview. I told her it was fine. She said she'd bring a camera crew the next day. I hung up and sat there for a while thinking about that fire. I hadn't talked about it in years. I went to the hall closet, opened a small box, and pulled out my old jacket and a few medals. I brushed off the dust. That afternoon, I found the photo album with newspaper clippings. I hadn't looked at it in a long time. I left it open on the table. They came the next morning, 2 people. The reporter's name was Lisa, and she brought a young guy named Kevin who handled the camera and sound. They were friendly, polite. Lisa asked if we could film in the living room. I moved a chair and cleared a spot on the table. She noticed the medals and the open album. "Wow, this is great material," she said. She asked about the fire again, and I told her what I remembered: the street, the heat, the kids upstairs, and how I got them out before the roof collapsed. Kevin recorded while I talked. Lisa asked if I still had the uniform. I said I did, in the back closet. She asked if I'd wear it for a few shots. I agreed. I went to the bedroom, changed, and came back out. It barely fit, but I managed. Kevin adjusted the camera and filmed a few quiet shots of me holding the medals. Lisa showed me a list of names. One of them stood out: Susan Myers. That was Rachel's mother. I stared at it for a second. Lisa said she was one of the kids I pulled out of the house that day. I nodded. "She's my daughter-in-law," I said. Lisa raised her eyebrows and said, "That's amazing." I didn't say anything else. They recorded a few more takes. I stood by the window. Kevin filmed the medals in my hand. Lisa asked if I had anything I wanted to say to the families. I said no, just that I was glad they made it. They thanked me and packed up their things. Before they left, Lisa said the segment would air Sunday night right after the evening news. I walked them to the door. They waved goodbye and drove off. I went back inside and put the uniform back on the hanger. I sat down in the kitchen and didn't move for a long time. On Sunday, I turned on the TV at 6:45. The news was already on. I waded through a story about road repairs, another about school lunches, then it cut to the segment. They used slow shots of me holding the medal, zoomed in on the photo album, and played a bit of my interview. My name appeared on the screen. Local hero, 1987 firefighter saves 4. Then came the pictures. One of them was the front page from that week in '87. Another was of me shaking hands with the mayor back then. Then they showed a photo of Susan, Rachel's mom, as a child. Lisa's voice narrated the whole thing. It lasted maybe 3 minutes. I didn't say much when it ended. I turned off the TV and sat there. After a few minutes, someone knocked at the gate. I looked outside and saw a neighbor waving. "I saw you on TV," she said. I nodded and thanked her. The next few hours were busy. A man from 2 blocks over came by with his kid. He said he remembered the fire when he was little. A woman brought cookies. Someone left a note in my mailbox. I got a few phone calls too. One was from a man who said his sister was one of the girls I carried out. He just wanted to say thank you. I told him I remembered. I tried to be polite. I didn't expect all of that. I wasn't used to people calling or dropping by. I spent most of the day at home, answering the phone and looking through the album again. Some photos were yellowed around the edges but still clear. I wiped each one with a dry cloth and put them back carefully. When it got dark, I made some tea and sat on the couch. I didn't feel proud or emotional. I just felt quiet. The house stayed calm the whole evening. Around 9 p.m., the phone rang again. I looked at the screen. It was Rachel. I didn't answer. I watched it ring and didn't move. She let it ring for a while, then it stopped. I stared at the phone for a minute. No voicemail. I turned it face down and left it on the table. I stood up, went to the living room and opened the cabinet. I took out the small red box where I kept the medals. One by one, I placed them back inside. I closed the lid, locked the box, and carried it to the bedroom. I unlocked the wardrobe and put the box in the back, behind a stack of folded shirts. I closed the door slowly and checked that it clicked shut. I didn't turn on the light. I walked back to the front room, turned off the lamp, and sat in the dark. I stayed like that for a long time, not doing anything else. Over the weekend, my daughter called and invited me to a family lunch. I wasn't sure why, but I said yes. I hadn't been to her house in a long time, and it had been tense between us since the thing with Rachel started. I got up early that day, put on a decent shirt, and took the bus across town. When I got to her place, there were a few cars outside. I rang the bell, and she opened the door, gave me a quick hug, and stepped aside so I could come in. The living room had some people already sitting down. Rachel was there, sitting on the couch with her phone up, filming herself like she always did. As soon as I stepped inside, I noticed something change. People got quiet. A couple of folks nodded. I gave a small wave and walked further into the room. Nobody said much. Rachel kept the phone pointed at her face. I sat down in the corner chair, the one next to the window. Someone handed me a glass of water. Rachel finally lowered her phone a little, looking at the screen like she was checking comments or adjusting something. No one said hello properly. It felt awkward, like everyone was waiting for something. A few minutes later, one of my daughter's uncles grabbed the remote, turned on the TV, and opened the news app. He scrolled a bit, then clicked on a video. It was the segment from last week, the one with the story about the fire, the rescue, my old uniform, and the medals. Everyone stared at the screen. The volume was up. I heard my own voice talking about the rescue. Rachel was still. Her phone was now in her lap. I saw her watching the screen. She didn't say anything. Nobody did. The video kept playing, slow and clear. They showed the photos from the fire, the one with the burned house, the newspaper clippings, and then the photo of the girl I pulled out, Susan, Rachel's mom. Her name came up right there on the screen, under a still photo of her as a child. You could hear a pin drop in the room. Nobody moved. Rachel looked down, not at the screen. Her hands were in her lap now. Josh was near the back door. I saw him glance around, then stand up slowly and walk toward the side of the room. Without a word, he opened the door and stepped outside. The door clicked shut behind him. My daughter had tears in her eyes. She covered her mouth with her hand. She didn't say a word either. Everyone just kept sitting there, still looking at the TV. When the video ended, the room stayed silent for a few seconds. I didn't wait for anyone to speak. I reached down, picked up my hat from the floor next to my chair, and stood up. I looked at my daughter. She wiped her face quickly and nodded. I walked slowly toward the door, passing Rachel on the way. She didn't look up. Her phone was on the table now, face down. I didn't say a single word to her. I didn't stop to explain anything. I didn't need to. I reached for my coat, which I had hung on the coat rack near the entrance. I slipped it on and opened the door. No one tried to stop me. I stepped outside, closed the door behind me, and started walking down the sidewalk. It was colder than I expected. I should have worn something thicker. I kept walking until I reached the end of the block. There was a little breeze, and I could hear a dog barking somewhere. At the corner, I stopped for a second and looked both ways. I didn't really have anywhere to go, but I wasn't going to stand there doing nothing. I turned right and kept walking slowly. The neighborhood looked the same as I remembered. Quiet, trimmed lawns, cars parked neatly along the curb. I passed the house with the blue mailbox and the one with the broken fence that had been like that for years. I walked by the elementary school I used to pick Rachel up from when she was a kid. Everything looked familiar, but everything also felt different now. I kept walking, hands in my coat pockets, thinking about how all of this had played out. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel anything, really. I just felt done. The whole thing was done. I reached the bus stop and sat on the bench. No one else was around. I waited quietly, just staring at the ground. The wind picked up a little while I was sitting there. I could still hear the faint sound of the TV from down the block, though it was mixed with voices now. Maybe someone turned it off. Maybe not. I didn't care. I just sat still, the cold pressing against the side of my face. I thought about calling someone, maybe an old friend, but I didn't. I reached into my pocket and felt my keys and the folded piece of paper where I had scribbled a grocery list earlier in the week. I didn't need anything from the store anymore. The bus showed up after a while. I didn't stand. I watched it pass. I stayed on the bench until the sun dropped lower and the wind got colder. Then I got up, walked home slowly, and didn't say a word to anyone the rest of the night. The sound of the TV stayed behind me. 3 days later, Rachel showed up alone. I heard the bell and looked through the window. She was standing there holding a folder tight against her chest. I opened the door but didn't say anything. She asked if she could come in. I stepped aside and let her walk in. She moved slowly, like she wasn't sure if she should be there. She sat at the table without waiting for me to tell her to. I stood for a few seconds, then sat across from her. She kept holding the folder like it was going to fall apart. I looked at her face. No makeup this time, eyes a bit red. She took a breath and said, "I did everything on impulse." Her voice cracked halfway through the sentence. She said she forged my signature and sent those papers without thinking. Then she added the video from my birthday made money online. I didn't say a word. I just stared at her. She opened the folder and slowly pushed it toward me. Inside were the original documents. Nothing looked touched or marked. I flipped through the pages without saying anything. She said Josh was gone, left her 2 nights ago, packed up his stuff and left a note. No explanation. She told me she stayed at a friend's place since then and had been thinking a lot. I didn't ask any questions. I got up, went to the kitchen, filled the kettle, and turned on the stove. She stayed quiet while I did that. When the water boiled, I made 2 cups of coffee. I brought them over, set one in front of her, and sat down. Neither of us touched the cups right away. We just sat there quiet. She started to cry. Not loud, but the kind where your shoulders shake a little. I didn't say anything. Just let her sit with it. Her head was down most of the time. She used her sleeve to wipe her nose. She said she felt ashamed and that everything spun out of control faster than she thought it would. She admitted she never really thought I'd find out about the contract or the fake signature. That it felt like a shortcut, a quick way to something bigger. She talked about the video from my birthday like it was some kind of project. People laughed, she said. It went viral. She paused after that, looking around the room. I think that's when it hit her that none of it was funny. She looked older, tired. She apologized again. I still didn't say anything, I just let her talk. The folder sat in front of me. I hadn't moved it. I could see one of the pages, my name printed clean across the top. I waited for her to finish. When she stopped crying, she wiped her face with both hands, sat up straight and looked at me. She said she understood if I never wanted to see her again. Then she said thank you, stood up, and pushed the chair back in. I didn't try to stop her. She walked slowly to the door, opened it, and turned around just long enough to say, "I won't come back, I'm sorry." I nodded once, didn't say anything, and followed her out to the gate. She didn't ask me to. I just did. I opened the gate. She stepped out and crossed the street without looking back. No bag, no phone out, nothing. Just her and that slow walk. I stood there for a few more seconds, watching her disappear between the houses on the next block. I didn't feel much, just tired. I went back inside. The folder was still on the table. I picked it up and looked through everything again, slower this time. It was all there. The sale papers, the contract, the scanned signature, clean copies, nothing missing. I closed it, carried it to the back room, and opened the tall cabinet where I keep old photos, bills, and the flashlight I never use. I pushed some things aside and slid the folder in behind a stack of old envelopes. Then I shut the door, locked it, and took the key off the top ledge where I always leave it. I slipped it into my pocket. I walked back to the table and picked up both coffee cups. Mine was cold. Hers hadn't been touched. I dumped them in the sink, rinsed them out, and left them on the rack to dry. The house was quiet again, everything back in place. I sat on the couch for a bit after that, didn't turn the TV on, didn't check the mail, just sat. I looked around the room. Same furniture, same pictures on the wall, same stack of books I never get around to reading. Nothing had changed, but everything had shifted a little. Couldn't really explain it, even to myself. It just felt different now. I thought about calling my daughter, maybe just to talk, but I didn't pick up the phone. I rested my head on the back of the couch and closed my eyes for a few minutes. Then I got up, checked that the front door was locked, and turned off the kitchen light. I didn't think about Rachel anymore that night. I didn't check if she had posted anything. I just went to my room, changed clothes, and went to bed early. The folder stayed in the cabinet. The next morning I left early to go to the notary office. I brought the folder Rachel had returned to me, and a few extra papers. The waiting area was quiet. I sat for a while before they called my name. I explained to the clerk that I wanted to register everything officially and permanently. I showed her my ID, the documents, and my proof of ownership. She nodded and started processing it all. I signed where needed. I asked for certified copies and told her I needed to send them to my lawyer and the foundation listed in my will. She printed the copies and stamped them all. I paid the fees and thanked her. On my way out, I bought an envelope and stopped at the post office to send the documents to the lawyer. It felt good to have everything in order. By the time I got back home, the sun was already high, and the streets were getting busier. After lunch, I went to the foundation's local office. I handed them the sealed envelope with a copy of my will and explained that I had updated it recently. The receptionist smiled and thanked me. She took it to the back room. A few minutes later, someone returned with a signed receipt confirming they got it. I folded the paper and put it in my wallet. On the way home, I stopped at a small hardware store. I picked up new locks, some screws, and a fresh battery set for the outdoor camera system. I also scheduled a technician to take a look at the gate later that day. When I got back, the building manager, Mr. Lopez, was waiting by the entrance. I told him about the locks and the technician. He nodded and handed me the spare keys he'd been holding. I thanked him. He asked if everything was all right. I just said I needed to take care of some things. He didn't ask more. Back in the house, I went straight to work. I removed the old lock from the front door and installed the new one. Then I checked every window to make sure they were still in good shape. A few had loose latches, so I tightened them. The technician showed up later in the afternoon. He took a look at the gate, replaced a few hinges, and added a new lock system. We tested it twice. It worked better than before. I also showed him where to install the 2 new security cameras, one by the entrance and one near the backyard. He drilled the mounts and got them running. I paid him in cash and walked him out. After he left, I checked the camera feed from my phone. Everything was clear. I felt better knowing I could see who came in or out. I closed the gate and locked it again before heading back inside. Later, I made a call to the reporter who did the firefighter story. Her name was Laura. She answered right away. I told her I appreciated the piece she had done and that I'd been getting kind messages because of it. She said it had been one of the most talked about segments that week. I thanked her again and asked if there was any way I could get a physical copy of the interview or the footage. She said yes, she'd send it. She asked if I was okay after everything that happened. I told her I was doing fine. She didn't push for more. We said goodbye, and I hung up. Later that evening, she emailed me a scanned copy of the article with a note attached. I printed it and put it in the wooden box where I keep my old medals. The lid closed with a soft click. I placed the box back in the drawer. After that, I spent a good while outside in the backyard. I pulled out an old broom and started sweeping the ground. There were dry leaves piled up near the fence and some plastic wrappers blown in from the street. I grabbed a trash bag and started tossing in old papers I had stored in the tool shed. Old bills, torn envelopes, broken clips. I found a stack of old magazines and leafed through them, but ended up throwing most away. I even found a few dusty shoes I hadn't worn in years. Those went too. I worked slowly, but didn't stop until the place looked better. I wiped the patio chairs, stacked some empty boxes in the corner, and folded a tarp that had been flapping around. When I finally stepped back to look at it all, I nodded. It wasn't perfect, but it was clean. I liked seeing the ground again. It had been a while since I cleared it like that. When the sun started to go down, I came back inside. I washed my hands in the kitchen sink, dried them on a towel, and turned off the porch light. I checked that all the windows were closed tight. Then I walked from room to room, turning off any lights I had left on. The house was quiet. I picked up my keys, walked to the front door, and stepped out onto the porch. I sat down in my usual chair. It wasn't cold, just a little breezy. I leaned back, looked at the gate, then over at the street. No cars, no people, just stillness. I stayed there a while, breathing slow, listening to the house settle behind me. It had been a long day, but a full one. When it got dark enough that I couldn't see the sidewalk clearly anymore, I stood up, went back inside, locked the door, and turned the last light off. I sat in the quiet of the porch until it was completely dark. 2 months passed without a word from Rachel. Then one morning I found an envelope in the mailbox. It had no return address, no name, nothing on the outside except my full name written in blue ink. The handwriting looked familiar, but I couldn't be sure right away. I took it inside, sat down at the kitchen table, and opened it slowly. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded in half. It was written by hand, no date, no greeting. As I started reading, I realized it was from Rachel. She said she had moved to another state and was working at a diner, serving tables and keeping to herself. She wrote that she had deleted her social media and was trying to start fresh. She said she didn't want anything from me, just wanted me to know she was alive. That was it. No phone number, no address, no way to reply. Just those words on one page folded neat inside the envelope. I read the letter again, slower the second time. It didn't say much. Just a few lines about her job, the town she had moved to, though she didn't name it, and something about trying to be better. She didn't say sorry again, and I didn't expect her to. She also didn't mention Josh or anyone else. Just her. She wrote that she understood if I threw the letter away, but she hoped I wouldn't. I sat there holding the paper for a few minutes, looking at the edges. It was lined notebook paper, a little wrinkled, like it had been in someone's bag for a while. I folded it back up and looked around the room. The radio was still on, playing some commercial I wasn't listening to. I stood up, walked over to the shelf in the living room, and pulled out an old book I hadn't touched in years. I slid the letter inside and pushed the book back in place. After that, I went to the backyard. The sky was clear, no clouds. The sun was getting low behind the trees. The ground had leaves again, even though I'd cleaned it recently. I walked slowly to the hose, turned the knob, and waited for the water to start. It sputtered at first, then ran steady. I dragged it along the concrete and started washing the floor. The dirt and leaves moved toward the drain. I didn't think much, just focused on the ground in front of me. The water made small puddles that circled around before slipping into the grate. I kept moving the hose back and forth until most of the surface was clear again. When I was done, I turned off the water and let the hose fall to the side. It slapped the ground once. I walked back inside, closed the door behind me, and kicked off my shoes by the mat. The air smelled like wet pavement and a little bit of soap. In the kitchen, I filled the kettle and set it on the stove. I didn't really feel like coffee, but making it had become part of my routine. While it heated, I walked around the house slowly, just checking things like I usually do. All the windows were locked. The front door was bolted. The cameras outside were blinking, showing they were still working fine. I turned off a few lights I didn't need, then came back to the kitchen. The water was bubbling, so I poured it over the coffee grounds and let it brew. I reached for the small cup I use most days and filled it halfway. Then I turned the radio off. It had been talking non-stop for hours, and I hadn't listened to any of it. The silence felt better. I took the cup with me to the living room, sat down in the chair near the window and rested the cup on the side table. I didn't drink it right away. I sat in the chair for a long time, just listening. From where I was, I could still hear the water draining slowly outside. It made a faint gurgling sound, like it always does when the hose has been running. It wasn't loud, but in the quiet house it was clear. The smell of coffee mixed with the smell of the damp yard. I leaned back and looked at the bookshelf again. I didn't try to find the letter. I just stared at the row of books, thinking about how long I'd had them. Some I had read, others I never touched. The one with the letter inside was a thick one with a torn cover. I don't even remember where it came from. I took a sip of the coffee. It was warm and a little bitter. I didn't add sugar this time. I let the cup rest again and closed my eyes for a bit, not sleeping, just sitting there. The water outside finally stopped making noise. It must have all drained by then. I stayed in the chair a little longer, then got up and washed the coffee cup in the sink. I dried it with the towel hanging near the stove and put it back in its place. I checked the back door once more, making sure it was locked. I turned off the light in the kitchen and walked down the hall to my bedroom. I didn't look at my phone. I didn't check the news or the weather. I just changed clothes, folded the ones I had worn, and put them on the chair by the bed. I lay down and pulled the blanket up to my chest. Before turning off the lamp, I thought again about the letter. It was simple, but it had weight. I didn't know if she'd ever write again, but I knew I'd keep that one. I turned off the light. The house was quiet. The sound of water was gone.